So in this webinar, we're going to talk about the D20 MX features. Then we will take a Q&A session for about 10 minutes. After that, we will discuss the D20 MX hardware, basically the different hardwares, the vertical, the horizontal chassis, and that will run for about 40 minutes. After that, we will start our second Q&A session, and we'll take a break for the middle of the webinar. Finally, we'll talk about the D20 MX software, how to build a sample configuration, how to add I/O to that sample configuration. And we'll do our final Q&A for about 10 minutes, and I will come back to do a summary on the webinar. Okay, so let's get to the first section on the D20 MX features.
Okay, so why the D20 MX? The Multilin D20 MX controller collects, filters, and sorts data from a wide range of intelligent devices, remote terminal units, relays, meters in the substation. The D20 MX preserves original data timestamps and accurate sequence of event logs, allowing data from large, diverse geographic regions and time zones to be analyzed in an extreme detail. Data can be presented simultaneously to multiple SCADA hosts. The D20 MX comes with a built-in suite of protocols and security applications such as remote authentication dial-in service, which is known as Radius, which of course is based on role-based access control, RBAC, to facilitate the integration with various substation devices and SCADA hosts. Simplest upgrade from a D20 ME to meet the substation growing requirements and regulations security would be to a D20 MX. For example, some of the regulations that you might want to comply to is the NERCSIP, which stands for the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and the Critical Infrastructure Protection, or you need an availability of certain protocols like the Distributed Network Protocol, DMP, Modbus, which is the Modicon bus, LNG, Landis+Gyr, or any of the IEC 6870-5 protocols, for example, the IEC 6870-5-101 or 6870-5-104, that's network and serial. So if you need, or if you have a necessity that's growing in your substation for your existing D20 devices for an additional security regulation or more processing power or a good collection concentration of data in the substation, the D20 MX would be a great fit. We'll visit the application of the D20 MX later in our discussion. D20 MX is an embedded single board computer powered by a 667 megahertz power QICC Pro processor, which is pin-to-pin compatible with the existing D20 processor. It's compatible with the existing D20 chassis, remote I/O, peripherals, and modems. Previous generations of the D20 D200 RTUs required add-on systems and components and software in order to support Ethernet communication and memory expansion. The D20 MX is equipped with a default integrated memory that's 10, 100, 1000 base T, Ethernet, and communication, and it's also core loaded with firmware that is comprehensive with a set of key substation automation applications. It also has the super cap, which replaces the legacy battery that required constant maintenance at the substation. Right now it requires way less maintenance than our legacy D20 generations. Okay, so this is a D20 MX horizontal chassis. As you can see, there is basically a D20 MX node with an integrated Ethernet port on it. And if we want to have more than 7-port support for our substation, so that we need more than 7 serial ports to communicate to serial devices, there is a possibility of adding the expansion card. So for the horizontal one, you can have up to 3 extra expansion cards, and you will have an expansion processor with a ribbon cable going to each one of these cards, and that means that the total will be 4 by 7 serial ports. Okay, so 28 serial ports are supported, 7 on the main board, and then 7 ports for each one of these serial cards, a total of 28 serial ports. This is the power supply for the horizontal chassis, and there's fuses out here to safeguard against installation issues. The chassis itself has a serial number, and you will find the serial number on the back of the chassis. Okay, so from the back of the D20 we can see the 7 serial ports for the first D20 MX, and of course if you have an expansion card, for every expansion card you are going to connect an extra one of these serial cards. We can see the D20 LAN connector, and we can see the serial number. In this case the serial number is 500-0280 with a REV16C, and that means that this chassis is compatible with the D20 MX. The D20 MX comes with a standard firmware, which is SAN0001. That's different from previous D20 families where we had a custom firmware per customer. So all our customers are getting the same firmware. There is a custom firmware that's SAN0002, and the difference here is that the B009, which is the mailbox, and the B021, which is the DMP DPA, carry a different version number in SAN002, which is compatible with the specific setups that are legacy setups requested by certain customers, but most of our customers are using the SAN0001, which we will talk about in our firmware section. The configuration system for the D20 MX is as you config. As you config comes with support for the Windows 7 64-bit and above, and there is many demonstrations of how to use as you config to configure the D20 MX. We'll cover it further in our future demonstration. The D20 MX comes with a role-based access check for either online or offline. So it will check the user when the Radius server is online, and basically when the user tries to access the D20 MX, the D20 MX will send the credentials to the server, to the Radius server, over an encrypted communication, and the Radius servers would reply back if the user is a valid user, would allow him access only to the parts that he was allowed access to, and this would allow you for a centralized management of all your D20 MXs that are deployed in the field. Also, we have the capability of offline check, where offline passwords can be encrypted and updated by Vault application. So that's also another advancement in the D20 MX support for cybersecurity. As you can see from the demonstration, one of the main applications of the D20 MX is as a data concentrator, which means that it will collect, filter, and reorder the information before it sends it either to an EMS or a DMS or any SCADA master. It also has the ability to do protocol conversion, so it can convert from one protocol to the other. So while the devices downstream are talking different protocols like Modbus, LNG 8979, or any of the legacy communication, and maybe the SCADA master is talking only one protocol like IEC 101 or DMP. The D20 MX will act as a great protocol converter between those different protocols from downstream to upstream. And also as a local automation platform, the D20 MX, like the entire D20 family, has a great ability for processing power in order to make calculations that's required by your HMIs in order to present the right values to your engineers and field services. So it has the ability to convert data before transferring that data to the HMIs. It also has the ability to take controls based on certain schemes that has been calculated locally on the D20 MX. So there is a calculator application, a logic building applications like logic links, which facilitate the fast, easy calculation and manipulation of data as a local application platform. When ordering a D20 MX, the first question is what kind of a chassis you would need. Is it the vertical or the horizontal? As we discussed, the vertical one has a support for 4 more serial expansion boards, yet the horizontal has a capability of 3 expansion serial ports. That's because of the physical limitation on the chassis itself. And the next thing is you want to decide what firmware you want to order. As we told you earlier, there's 2 types of firmware. There's the SAN001 and the SAN002. One of the great features that is allowed is multi-partition, and this is a decision that would have to be made whether we should split the applications into, or make the applications live in different virtual environments from a software perspective, or all of the applications will be on the main board. If you need that capability, like let's say you have multiple logic that have to run in one environment and another logic that has to run in another environment, if you need that capability, then that's available in your multi-partition, and you would have to order a multi-partition license for it. The last thing is you have to understand the layout of your HDLC network, whether you have redundant, what kind of HDLC support is required, and with the D20 MX has a greater capability than the normal D20 platform. Let's say you already have a D20 and the chassis is compatible with the chassis, power supply, communication card, peripherals are all compatible. Then maybe all you need to order is just an upgrade kit. If that's true, then you need to decide on what kind of D20 main CPU, D20 MX main CPU you need, whether it is Ethernet, fiber, backward support of a fiber connection, and then you have to assess the need for the serial, which of course is 2 parts, is the processor and the expansion card, and which if required, then you will have to add as many serials based on the number of serial ports that's required. And finally, if you need the licenses, again, for the multi-partition, you can order the licenses for the multi-partition if required.
Okay, so thank you for those who have provided the questions. We will start with answering a couple of these questions that came through the chat, and please keep them coming up. Okay, so the first question is, how long does the capacitor banks last? The capacitor banks would last at least 15 days. That's without power, and all configuration will be intact, and the clock will be backed up, so the clock of the RTU will keep going for about 15 days. Another question is, what's the difference between the ME and the MX power? Well, the ME and the ME2 was powered by a battery, and that battery would last 2 years, but it had to be serviced. Like the shelf life was 2 years, regardless whether it had power or it didn't have power. Basically, we replaced the 2-year service with a lifetime capacitor banks, but the capacitor banks will give you 15 days. So it's a longer quality and longer support with less maintenance for sure. Okay, another question is, how many types of the MX? Well, there is 3 types. There is the front copper, which is the 3001, 526 3001. There is the front fiber, that is 526 3002. 3003, sorry, and then there is the back fiber, which is 526 3005. Okay, and okay, so this is a good question. Really, do we need an expansion or a different chassis to support the back fiber? And the answer is yes. You might need an expansion, because remember, at the angle where the fiber is connected to the back of your chassis, sometimes you cannot bend it too much as a fiber cable, so you have to leave a room for it to come. So you might want to extend the back cover of the chassis, or the back of the chassis a little, if it is not rack mounted. Now, if it's rack mounted, you don't have a problem, but if it is chassis mounted, you would have to put an extender on it, and it's available as part of our online store D20 MX offering. Okay, no further questions. We'll go to the next section.
So if you're purchasing a D20 MX from us, what the D20 MX hardware, the first one that we will demonstrate to you, will come with is a single D20 MX main board, the D20 MX chassis, the power supply with a 12 volt and a 5 volt, and it could come either with 24 volt ISO or 48 volt ISO. 2 fuses to avoid any miswiring, an off on button, that's from the front of the D20. If I would show you the back, okay, so what you will get is, don't forget to have your ferrite EMI cancellation filter, and you will get the 7 serial IOs. So this is IO1, IO2, IO3, IO4, IO5, IO6, IO7. There is a legacy Westmain connector if you have to connect to an old Westmain modem, and there is your 0 to ground volt connector, and this is your D.20 connector, so similar to any D.20 or D20 family, right? Nothing changed. The important thing is to remember to locate your serial numbers. So on the Western D20 M Plus board, you will find the serial number under the power supply glass cover, okay? And then the main chassis will have a serial number on it, okay? And then you have a serial number for the Western VME card on the back of the D20. So if I open it up a little just to show you, this is your Western VME card, okay? And so that's your D20 single main board chassis. The other D20 MX that you might get from us is D20 MX with serial expansion cards that will allow you to basically add more serial ports to your setup. So in this case, this is a horizontal D20 MX, and it's equipped with all 3 serial expansion cards. Now you don't have to have all 3 in here, you could have only 1 or 2 or 3 depending on your need. Each one will add an extra 7 serial ports as you see, and each one will connect to a separate ribbon cable to the applicable Western card. So again, it comes with the main board, up to 3 serial expansion cards, and the main board has its own Western like you've seen in the previous demonstration, and it has its own 7 ports. So the total that you can get here in serial ports is 7 by 4 or 28 serial ports. You've got your power supply, you've got the on-off button, the same power supply, and the same connectors in the back for your peripherals, your D.20 link, and serial I/O connectors. Each one, of course, comes with its own serial number and part number to identify it. For a vertical D20 MX, chassis, of course, is bigger in order to accommodate the extra serial expansion cards. This one, of course, was equipped with 4 extra expansion cards, including the main card. So, like we said in the previous demonstration, it's 7 ports per card. When you've got 4 cards and the main, that's a total of 5 by 7, 35 serial ports. It comes with the RS-232 connector on the main board, the 2 Ethernet connectors, and the main card has the ribbon expansion serial connector. The power supply could be either this one or a bigger power supply that has both the 5 and the 12 volt in the single power supply, the on-off button, and your fuses. The vertical chassis has the ability to equip more of those chassis or chassis mount modems if needed. Okay, that's from the front of the chassis. From the back, for every one of the serial I/O card, you will get a series of 7 serial ports that connect to the serial I/O cards. You've got your redundant D.20 I/O connectors, and that's your vertical D20 MX chassis. To download the D20 MX CD, the first step is to access the technical website. So in this case, the technical website is available at sc.ge.com/SAS Tech Support. And once you access this website, it takes you to the registration website. In the registration website, we have the options of either submitting a new registration, like if you're not registered in this website, you just give us your information, submit it to our technical support team, and they will be able to support you. Or you can click on login if you already have registration with us. Probably once they register you in our system, they will provide you with a single sign-on credentials that you can use on the website. If you're having trouble registering or submitting in your request for access, you can always contact our customer service. So you click on the contact us and you'll be able to contact our technical support. Okay, so I do have an access. I'm going to click on the login. It will ask me for my SSO. And then I have to access the substation automation product. And then under the D20 MX, go to the latest version. In here you will find a lot of information. So there is a configuration documentation information, but our recommendation is that you download the full CD. Okay, so I will do this. I will go to the D20 MX CD image and download the full CD. Click on save. Now the download have started. It's about 337 megs, so it takes some time. Once you have it, unfold it, and now you're ready for whatever step that has a requirement for a D20 MX CD. Okay, so the CD download is done. This is the name of the CD, and it's basically SGA 0026 with an ISO extension. When I open this CD, here's the content of the CD. You will get the configuration files, the D20 MX CD content from documents and images. You will have the application definitions for all the applications. This is very important, the firmware files, which we will going to use it in order to stage our files that are required for the upgrade. And you've got your images and module layout CD. Now, since we have the firmware files as part of this CD, now we're ready to do our staging of the files, after which we are going to restore one of the configurations, the default configuration that's going to be used with our MX for the firmware upgrade process. So the next step is I go to my C drive in order to stage my files. I basically create a new folder directly on the C drive. I'm going to name the folder after the firmware, so we'll name it SAN001.160. Now the folder is empty. I will start to move in the files that are required for the upgrade from the CD that we downloaded earlier. And as I said, the folder that you want to open is the firmware files folder from the CD. I open the SAN 1.60 folder. I need to copy the two files, apple.out and vxworks. Now make sure you don't copy any of the other files. So this is the first step of the staging. We move those two files into our folder C SAN 001160. Remember this path because we're going to use it with sgconfig during the firmware upgrade process. The other file that we need to move in here, I go back to the top of my CD, and it is in the HSP. Here you have to make a decision whether you want to default it to 9600 baud rate or 19200 baud rate. So you've got two files here. If you pick the 9600, you get 9600 when you download it, 19200. By default, your card will be at 9600 or 19000 depending on the HSP file that you pick up. So I copy the file, go back to my SAN default directory. Now I've got all the files staged. So these are the three files, apple.out, vxworks, and the HSP file staged and ready for my firmware upgrade in sgconfig. Remember the folder name, so it's C:\SAN0001.160. Okay, and we're ready for our upgrade step. Okay, so we've shown how to download the CD, how to stage the files, the firmware files, the three files, apple.out, vxworks, and the HSP file. The next 6 steps are basically you set up your laptop to be on the same network as your D20 MX device. The IP address of the laptop that I normally use is 192.168.2.2. Your device will be 192.168.2.1. And then you start sgconfig. We restore a configuration from the CD, right? Our default D20 MX configuration. And then we point it to the apple.out directory where we have put our apple.out. Remember, c:\/san001.160. And then once we point it out to that file, now we can go to the make sure that the ISCS network is set up, and now we can download our VxWorks firmware, then download our HSP file, go serially online with it, apply the HSP file, and finally do a commit command, and then you can go check your image and SI commands to make sure that the upgrade took place. Of course, you need to download a valid configuration for the D20 MX to work. Okay, so let's get to the next step, which is to set up our IP address of the PC or the laptop that we're using. So the first step is to open your control panel, open the local LAN, set it to 192.168.2.2, 255.255.255.0, and that's it. Once your local LAN is setting is done, so your laptop is or PC is ready, now you can start your sgconfig. When we start the sgconfig, the first step is to restore the configuration from the CD. Now to do that, we click on the GE logo, archive, project, restore, and then we point to the CD. Under the CD, we open the configuration files folder. In the configuration files, we open the sgconfig, and we point to the D20 MX 01160.7 zip. Now, because it's .7 zip, it means it's an sgconfig configuration that can be restored inside the sgconfig. Then we click OK, OK on that. You accept the terms. And the project is restored, as you can see. So we click OK on that. Now we highlight our device and we click on the TeraTerm. We select the serial communication port. We log in to the device with our default name and password, and the idea is we need to check the IP address and the software version, right? As we said, we're going to upgrade from 1.5 to 1.6. So we go to the error log, make sure the IP address is proper. So it's 192.168.2.1. So that's within the 192.168.2.2, which is our PC IP address. And then we go to the shell. We type the img command. In the img command, what you're looking for is number one, that this is a 1.5 version, right? So we look at the line that says firmware, and in there we can see SAN1150. We also look at the JMON line, and we look for the version number that it's matching, and the boot ROM is 1.5, so that's perfect, which is the same boot ROM number for 1.6. Another command that we can issue is the SI. In the SI, we're basically looking at the FPGA version of 3.04, and that's per our D20 manual. Okay, so right now I can close my TeraTerm. I go back to my device, and I want to point the device to the apple.out. So I open the properties of the device, edit properties, and then I click next. And I look at both LANs that they match, so it's 192.168.20 segment and 0.3 segment on the LAN B. Important one is the LAN A, that it is 0.20 segment. And then under firmware, we can see that the firmware is AN160. In the code image, that's where we pointed to the apple.out. So we click on the three dots, and we go to our C drive where we staged our three files. Remember CSAN 001160? We highlight the apple.out file in here, which is an image file, and then we click open. We check the LAN settings to make sure that the device is going to be set up to 192.168.2.1 on the LAN A, optionally on the LAN B 3.1, and then we click next and finish, and then we 100% generate the device. This will get rid of the red dot on the device once it's generated. So the red dot disappeared, and we can see 0 errors and 0 warnings for the generation. Now we go to communication options. Make sure it's set up to ISCS LAN. So we're going to do our firmware upgrade over the LAN. If this is not enabled, you will not be able to access the firmware transfer menu item. So now we drop the firmware transfer menu item, and then we click the firmware transfer. And that will start the first step, which is the firmware transfer. Make sure you don't interrupt the operation, you don't disconnect the network while the download is taking place. Click on yes, enter the default name and password. You might get this screen, you may not get it depending on your network setup. So we just click yes. And with the download of the firmware would start. The firmware transfer has completed successfully, as you can see. And then we click OK on that. So now we have transferred our firmware. We have upgraded our software. We need to log in and make sure that that took place. So the D20 MX at this point will go through a reboot. So we'll see it going through the fast reboot. I display all the messages to make sure that you're getting something close to the messages that I'm getting. Once you're prompted, you would plug in the default name and password for username and we go back to the D20 MX prompt. Good, that's expected. In here, if we want to look at the current version number that we just downloaded, which is 1.6, and look at the IP address, we would issue the IF and INF to look at the IP address. And we can see that the IP address is 192.168.21. So that's good. It still can talk to our PC. And we can see that the SAN number has been upgraded to SAN 1.16. Now we can get out of Terra term, so we can exit our session, close the Terra term, and start the final step, which is the HSP transfer. Click yes, put our name and password. Of course, again, you don't want to interrupt it. You don't want to disconnect the communication while the HSP is being transferred. The HSP consists of your boot ROM image, your JMON image, so it has a lot of information inside it. And depending on your upgrade situation, the HSP might have more information. So in this case, the HSP has been transferred successfully. We click OK. And now we go back to serial communication. So we click on options, click on direct serial. We set up for the COM port. In my case, the COM port is COM3, and then we click OK. And then we click connect. When we connect, we press enter, we get the name and password. And now we want to click on apply HSP from the menu. Now that we downloaded the HSP, and then we get the list of requests that it should have a local prompt, and then it would start applying the HSP. Now this will take approximately 5 minutes before it's done, depending on the speed of your MX and your PC. The operation is done. In this case, it's prompting us that no update took place because the JMON between 1.5 and 1.6, there isn't a major difference, and the boot ROM, there isn't a major difference. So we click OK, but it's to follow the process, right? That's what we had to do. So first, download the firmware. Second, download the HSP. Then apply the HSP like we did here. And once you're done applying that HSP, the RTU will start the booting process. And again, I'm showing you all the messages. This is a normal startup. So now it's saying the application definitions don't match the firmware that's in here, and that makes sense because the configuration that's in here is a 1.5 configuration. We haven't downloaded a 1.6 configuration. So now we log in. It's going to come to the prompt because there isn't a valid configuration. We issue the commit command, COMMIT, and then we type yes, and that would safeguard our firmware, the VxWorks file, from the primary to the secondary, that VxWorks that we downloaded. As you can see, the apple.out file is also copied from the primary to the secondary. We come back to the prompt. What we want to do right now is we want to download the configuration. So we sync to device, okay, from the menu, sync to device. And that will download our 1.6 configuration. So the steps where we download the firmware, we check that the firmware got downloaded, we download the HSP, we go back to serial connection, and then we apply the HSP, and we commit the firmware download, and finally we download our configuration. So to recap, what we did so far is downloaded the D20 MX CD, we staged our files, made sure our PC and the D20 MX are on the same IP address, IP segment, and then we downloaded the firmware, we downloaded the HSP, we applied the HSP, we committed the downloads, and finally we downloaded the configuration. This is the final step. Now we boot our device, and if we did everything properly, the D20 MX would boot up properly, and we can log in with the default name and password. Once you're done this step, your D20 MX is ready for you to download your custom configuration, right? So remember, at the beginning of this, we said make sure you back up your 1.5 configuration, that if you need to upgrade it to 1.6 later, and then download it after the firmware has been updated. Starting application, that's a good point. So we press enter at this point. We get the default welcome message. We put in the default name and password. We go to the error log. We make sure that the IP address is proper. Then we go to the shell. Again, the two common commands that we use is img. As we can see that the boot ROM version is 1.5, the SAN is 1.6, and the JMON is the proper JMON version, and the FPGA version is the right 3.04 version. And our configuration or upgrade of firmware from 1.5 to 1.6 is done. As long as you follow the steps properly, your job is well done.
Okay, thank you for your question. This is a very good active session. So I'll start with the first question. Is the D20 MX supported in a vertical and a horizontal chassis? And the answer is yes, it's supported in both vertical and horizontal chassis. As these chassis age, you might need, our recommendation is that you replace the power supply. So we think if you're gonna upgrade your MX vertical or horizontal chassis, it makes sense to also replace the power supply. So to support the MX. Okay. Can my current HMI work with the D20 MX if I have a HMI that's working with the ME? The answer is yes. Any HMI that used to work with the ME will work with the MX. We do have our HMI that you can get from us, which is the PowerLink Connect. Okay. What time sync is supported in the MX? So you've got the IRIG-B, you've got the SNTP support, and whatever legacy support you had with the D20 family, you still have it with the MX. I've got a Logic Links 32-bit, and I need to use my 64-bit operating system. The answer is we do have a 64-bit Logic Links supported right now, and you can purchase license and use it on the MX. Thank you for your questions. We'll go to the next section.
When you start sgconfig, the first thing that you're gonna get is this splash screen, and basically at this point sgconfig will be initializing and setting up the environment, setting up the database.
and then sgconfig would start. In this sgconfig, what I would like you to notice is first you've got the GE logo at the top here, and that's where all your menu items are. You've got an about, and when you click the about button, that will tell you what version of sgconfig, what is the installed packages, and this is the interface where you would add an add-on like install a package or check for an update. If you want to exit sgconfig, you would click on the GE logo and then the exit sgconfig button. On this start page or the main page, what you will find is you will find links to download the documentation. You will find the links to raise a technical support or to contact our technical support, a link to our website, a link to contact our sales support, or to request training requirements. Under the screencasts is where you will find videos that will guide you through how to do certain tasks with sgconfig. So this is the overview video, which is recommended if you want to get an overall understanding of sgconfig. You can understand how to work with devices and applications through these screencasts, and you can learn how to create a D20 device, configure a D20 device, configure DMP through these screencasts. This library is constantly increasing, and more is added to it based on requirements of our customers. So this is the top menu, and we've got the tabs in here. So let's say, for example, you close your start page, okay, and you want to display it again. You would click on the Windows and click on Display Start Page, and that will show the start page again for you. In here is a list of all the projects that you create in your database. Notice that the database is named after your computer name. And there is application lists that you can access when you are configuring the device. In the preferences, you can look at the global preferences for your system. So for example, one of the recommended changes is to always check mark the display device image. Now, if you're working with low memory system or a system that cannot display the images for some reason, that's why this option is available to uncheck it. Okay. Your D2X preferences are listed separately under this menu, and this will allow you to define what are the default colors for editing, what is the communication terminal colors from a font, if you want a different font on it or a different color on it, table editor, and options. Okay, so hopefully you have an overall understanding of the interface. Under the GE logo is most of the options to manage a project, and once you have a project which what sgconfig revolve around, then we can work inside a project to work with a device. Okay, to create a project, you click on the GE logo, new project. You give the project a name. And now we have an empty main page that we can work with a project. The project consists of many pages. As you can see, once you open a project, you get this menu where you're allowed to insert a page, delete a page, rename a page inside a project.
Okay, so we can do that. Let's insert a new page and call it page 2. Now I've got 2 pages. I've got the main page and page 2. And if I want, I can delete a page. And I go delete page, and that would delete the page that I just created. We can rename a page. Instead of page 1, main page, I'm gonna call it page 1. And that's the page that I have, and it's named page 1. So that's how you insert, delete, rename. Look at the properties of a page, and you can add descriptions for what this page. So I can say for training purposes. Okay, and you can print a page. So that's all inside a project. If I want to copy a project, there is many ways to do it. One way is to right click on the project, click copy project, name it project 2. I can rename a project by right clicking on a project, rename a project, and I'm gonna name it to project 3. I can delete a project, just right click on a project, delete a project. And now all I have is the new project. We can archive a project or save it basically. So we right click on a project, archive a project. We can archive it anywhere we want. So I'm gonna archive it to my desktop, and it's gonna be named new project.7zip. And then we click OK. And we can restore a project once it's archived. So I'm gonna go ahead, close this project, delete it. Now that I have it archived, and I can restore a project by going to the GE logo, archive, project, restore. I have to select the file, so I'm going to select again the same file that I had originally on my desktop, which is the new project, and it has to have the 7-zip extension on it. Now we click OK, click OK again. The archive package does not include information that can be used to identify the source because password was not used when it was created. Okay. So if we accept that, then we can click accept. And the project is restored. So just to summarize, we have shown you how to create a project, copy a project, delete a project, archive a project, rename a project, and restore a project. To create a device, we go to device templates. Under the system devices, we select the D20 MX, and the D20 MX, we select the version 1.6. Version 1.6, we select new installation. We drop it in the open workspace of the page. Under the device, we will get a device creation wizard. In the device creation wizard, we have to give it a name. So we'll name this one my D20 MX. It's a LAN device. If there is redundancy, we'll enable the redundancy. If there's any license applicable, we'll enable the license. Otherwise, we just click next. And in here, we have one segment basically enabled of network. So we're going to put a number for it. So let's say 192.168.2.0. And for a network mask will be 255.255.255.0. Then we click next. We confirm the board number matches our board number, and we confirm that the firmware is the firmware that we wanted as a target. Can go then to LAN settings. Under LAN specific, I'm okay with this IP address of 2.1 for my device. And then we look at our services and we look at the ports that are enabled. With everything done, we can click finish. And our sample device is ready to be generated. Because this is a network device, we go to the 100% generate menu. And now our device has been generated. I've connected my USB into COM4, which is connected to my D20 MX. So now I can connect to it. In order to connect to it, I would have to set up my options of connection. So I will set it to direct serial, select the COM port, which is COM4 in this case, and then under the port settings, I have to set up the baud rate to 9600, and I can enable the fast download of 115/200. It will automatically switch to that baud rate. And then we click OK. Now we can connect to the device. We click connect. We'll allow the device to start up. So we turn on the device. Device is going through a boot sequence at this time, and once the boot sequence is done, we can log into the device. If the device has a special name and password, then you need to get it. Otherwise, you can put the default name and password if that works with it. I'm in a lab environment, so I will use the default name and password when I get the prompt. Okay, so at this time I've got the prompt. I'll put in the default name and password. Log in, go to the shell, and now I'm able to download my configuration. So I will click on the sync to device or press F7. The transfer of the configuration to the device will start. Of course, because we checked the high baud rate of download, it's downloading at 115/200. And then we can click on the boot to restart the device. Now my device is restarting. If everything was done properly, then we should be able to see the prompt and proper booting again. And our device is ready for a startup. Press enter and put normal name and password. Now we can go to the shell. So we check first that the IP address is set up properly, 192.168.2.1 per our settings that we have put into the device. Then we can go to the shell and type the img command. We can see that the firmware version is proper and the right JMON application is there. We can go out of the prompt by typing exit. And if you want to log out, as you can see, Control L will allow you to log out. So pressed Control L and logged out. That's it. This is how you make a sample configuration and download it. To add the peripheral, we double click on the device. That will open the application menu. Then we can pin the application menu. We basically want to look at B003. So we highlight the B003 application. And to open the application to add the peripheral, we double click on the application. And now we can double click on any of the open places, select our C0 peripheral, and then we click OK. And normally I would click OK here before adding the point names. Now I could add the point names in the same interface, but you can click OK, make sure that the device is added properly, and then double click on the device again. And now we can go to the point configuration or IO configuration. Then we can name our point. So I would like to name the first point to be point 1 and the second point to be point 2. At this point we can click OK, and that's how you add a peripheral to the D20 MX. Now we can generate and download our configuration.
Okay, so we have covered a lot of material. We have finished the D20 MX features. We talked a little bit about the hardware, a little bit about how to do a firmware upgrade, and we closed with talking about the software. Thank you for staying with me. So this is the final Q&A session for this webinar. First, can I start with a template config from inside sgconfig versus the configuration that came on the CD? And the answer is yes, you can start with that template configuration. You can use any valid D20 MX configuration during the final stage of an upgrade process. You can take that configuration, if you know it's valid, download it, and the MX will start with that valid configuration. The other question is, can I upload my configuration from an M++ device into sgconfig and then convert it to an MX? And the answer is yes, you can. So there is two ways, like we discussed. The first way is to bring a configuration that you have in your existing hard drive. The second way is you connect directly to the device, whether M++ or ME, upload the configuration, Shift F7, and then change it into a device inside sgconfig, and then upgrade your device. Very good question. Okay, the last question is, can I convert my logic from an ME to MX? You really don't need to convert the logic, right? The same logic that worked on the ME will work on the MX. You just need to upgrade to the MX, load your logic links, logic, and it will work as long as all the mapping is intact, and it should be. Okay, thank you very much for staying with me.